this project I'm using a tile adhesive which will help the pavers sit really tight. The idea with this tile cement is to get enough on to get a nice tight sandwich. Once we've poured a small bed of concrete in the form, we organise our rebar to make sure it's in the right place. When our forms get filled with concrete, we just smooth it out with our trowel.
Close the door and leave the light on. The morning light should be coming soon. Kick off your shoes and leave the winter and the pain it brings to you. Lay your head upon my shoulder. Shut off your thoughts and clear your mind.
In our last episode, we did the dry layout for the paving bricks we're going to lay on top of the hollow block wall. Today we're going to cement them in. In this project, I'm using a tile adhesive to glue these pavers to the top of our wall. You could also use mortar for this process, but we want our pavers to sit really tight and thin to the top of the wall, so tile cement is a better product. This tile cement can look quite white or light grey when it dries, so we're adding a pigment to help it blend with the bricks in case any of it's seen. I'm using a powered mixing system with my drill so we can get a really thin, consistent mixture which will help the pavers sit really tight to the top of the wall. The idea with this tile cement is to get enough on to get a nice tight sandwich in between the brick and the wall, but not too much because we don't want the material oozing out under the bricks and staining the split face block. Once we've got a nice flat bed of tile adhesive on the top of the wall, we butter the back of the bricks with the tile adhesive to get a really good bond between the two. Here I'm using a paint scraper to apply the adhesive to the back of the brick, as it works more efficiently than the trowel. I'm careful to make sure the tile adhesive is only in the centre part of the wall and not on the outer edges. This is part of our system for not letting any of the tile cement get on the front of the wall. Part of managing the process effectively is only sticking down small groups of bricks at a time. After I've completed sticking down one of our batches, we double check everything with a level and make sure all the bricks are lined up correctly. I clear the next batch of bricks off the wall, then butter the wall with our tile adhesive and start applying the bricks. Keeping a clean and organised setup as we continue this process is essential so we don't accidentally end up with tile cement in the wrong place. So I keep my bucket of tile adhesive as close as possible to where I'm applying it on the wall. I use my wet sponge to clean off any spills as they happen, as it's important to not let this dry on the bricks. This end of the wall is where we went to all this trouble to make sure the natural stone wall and these bricks would segue together nicely. With one section of our wall complete, we can settle into the rhythm of this process. It's a lovely sunny day and I'm really enjoying laying these bricks at the moment. It's been a lot of hard work to get the wall to this stage, and this is truly the icing on the cake.
Take my hand, lead me to the promised land, where it's built to last, where the river runs. Soak my skin, cleanse the guilt I feel within. Promise everything, take me home.
Keep staring at the sign, but I'm running out of time.
I'm doing everything that I can.
This is a good example of how we apply the tile adhesive. After getting a decent amount on top of the wall with our trowel, we then smooth it off with our paint scraper. I then remove the excess with my trowel to be used on the next batch. I take my time buttering the adhesive on the paver. I want to get good coverage and work it into the texture of the paver so we get a really good bond between the wall and the brick.
Trying to find a reason, but I ain't got one. Taking me down, wash away the pain. In
Yesterday we completed capping this wall, the idea being that this colour ties back into the original brick of the house behind me. One of the little details we did on this wall is these tiles are on the windowsills of the existing house. So we incorporated these little leftover pieces just in the end of the wall here. With the retaining wall complete, it's time to turn our attention onto the ramp, where we'll be using more of this yellow brick. But first we have some concrete to form out. Now that our wall's finished, we can complete the footings and foundations for this ramp area. We're going to build some concrete foundations on the outside corner of this wall that match what we've already got existing over here. I had to wait till this wall was built to do the foundation that runs along the inside here. Up till now we've just had it temporarily filled with gravel so we could use it to get materials in and out. The outside foundation has already been poured. We did that when we did the foundation for the wall. But we're going to build a formwork that matches the other side here. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to excavate a little channel along the side here, and that's what's going to create the platform for this ramp. The first thing we've got to do is remove some of this temporary scaffolding I put together to hold the gravel up whilst we got this wall built. This little retaining wall was part of the structures we had to put together just so we could keep this ramp in use for bringing materials in throughout this project. So now we're at the stage where I have to remove it so I can build a proper form to pour the concrete here. Here I'm using my usual trick of using my screw to clean out the screw head so I can remove it easily. After disassembling all the form pieces, we give them a quick clean up so they're ready to be used next time. This upper part of the ramp already has an existing concrete foundation we poured out when we did our wall foundation. So I just need to dig the gravel out to expose this original foundation, and we're going to pour our concrete on top of this to have a really strong system. I'm using the same piece of timber I used for the outside ramp to build this inside ramp formwork. Seeing it was already cut at the right angle and is almost the right length, I just need to trim a small piece off and it should fit easily into the inside. I'm gently tapping it into place with my hammer as we've got a nice snug tight fit. I've got to double check the measurement here because we want it to be 150mm wide to give us plenty of room for gluing the pavers on that are going to match the top of the wall pavers. This is going to set the edge for this little concrete pour we're going to do along here. That's why we had to wait before this was finished before we could do it. With this top edge all plumb and secure, we just need to add a bit of plywood backing to hold the concrete for when we pour it out. I'm just fixing this plywood in with some screws to keep it solid. With the top half of the ramp formwork complete, we move on to excavating this bottom half of the ramp. I have to dig this gravel out quite gently because I don't want to damage our split face block wall. I'm using some of the gravel I excavate from this trench to backfill the plywood on our upper ramp so it can be solid when we pour the concrete in. I'm trying to be careful not to create a cave-in situation here whilst I excavate this gravel out. We're just trying to dig a slot big enough to put our formwork in for the concrete. A bit of a rainstorm coming through, we'll just take a break. After the rain stopped, we got back to excavating this ditch and then started building the formwork for it. Just like on the upper ramp, I'm recycling the same piece of formwork I used for this lower ramp previously when we poured out that outer edge. Once I'm satisfied the ramp part fits properly, we have to add an extension for this bottom part that's going to incorporate the lower path. I'm just setting the correct angle so we can pre-assemble this and insert it into our excavated trench. I'm using a few scrap bits of timber as packers to get it level. Once we have the formwork sitting in the right part of our trench, we want to double check it with our levels to make sure it's going to match the outer edges that we've already poured. We check the measurement of the width just like we did on the upper ramp. With the formwork sitting plumb and level, We add a bit of plywood to hold the concrete in, fix it off with some screws, and then backfill it with some gravel to make it really solid. We do one final check along the entire formwork to make sure everything's in place. Then we wash the whole thing down in preparation for pouring our concrete. We have to temporarily remove some of our braces so we can fit the rebar in. We measure the formwork and custom cut our rebar so it'll fit in. After I've installed all the rebar into the trenches, I put the braces back on in preparation for us to pour this concrete. These wood braces that I installed is what's going to stop the whole system from caving in as we stand next to it pouring concrete in. I'm just using my standard concrete mix of 6 parts gravel sand to 1 part Portland cement with a bit of bondcrete to help it bond to the pre-existing foundation. Once we've poured a small bed of concrete in the form, we organise our rebar to make sure it's in the right place. I'm just shoring up the end of our formwork here with a couple of heavy pieces of concrete so this wood doesn't move whilst we pour more concrete in the system. I continue to agitate the concrete into the rebar and then top it up with more concrete. It's important we get the bottom part filled first and work our way up because we're working on a ramp. That's part of the key of getting the concrete to settle properly, is to start from the bottom and work your way up. I'm only filling the ramp section about halfway up because we want this concrete to gel up and get a little solid, because there's always a bit of an issue of the concrete running downhill. I'm just making sure the rebar stays centered in this pour. After working the concrete in on this lower ramp, we're ready to move up to the higher ramp area. We're using the same method we used on the lower ramp, which is to get as much concrete in the bottom end of the system first and then work our way uphill. I'm trying to pour this as carefully as possible because I'm trying to avoid getting any concrete on the cracked face wall. Once I've got enough concrete in the form, we agitate it thoroughly as normal because we want to get a really good adhesion to the foundation that we poured with the wall. I continue adding more concrete, agitating it and troweling it out until our forms get filled. Letting the bottom half of the ramp rest up, the concrete's gelled up enough for us to add more concrete and continue the process. Take me down, wash away the rain. Get a cold Montgomery rain. Get a cold Montgomery rain. Get a cold Montgomery rain. I keep going back and forth with the upper and lower ramps with my concrete pours to let this concrete gel up.
Take the wall, you built to hide behind it all. We're all fighting wars, no one knows.
When our forms get filled with concrete to the top of the timbers, we just smooth it out with our trowel and let it dry. On my next episode, whilst we let this concrete harden up, we're going to turn our attention to the garden bed. We're going to finish off this garden bed today, clear out some of the unwanted plants, complete our treated timber wall on the other side, put a rock wall through here. That's all part of completing this whole zone.
Take my hand, lead me to the promised land, where it's built.
Thanks for joining me this week on my YouTube channel. Check the link below, and while you're at it, hit the subscribe button or make a comment so I can help you with your future construction solutions. And don't forget to follow our channel for more ideas and how-to tips for home and garden projects.